Hello and welcome to Nikon Sessions. In this episode, we're going to be talking about fashion photography. I'm joined by two incredibly talented photographers. Let's start with some introductions. Just talk to me about what you do and who you are.
I'm Ava Pivot. I'm working as fashion and beauty photographer. I feel and see me more as portrait photographer. It's more the main part of my work.
My name is Hermelio Miguel Aquino. Most people call me Kino. I'm a fashion photographer and an advertising photographer and director.
So I think a really interesting point that you said there about how you might be more of a portrait fashion photographer. So a real good place to start would be, what is fashion photography to you and how do you go about that?
So for me, it's always the main factor is always my model. I want to see something special in the people in front of my lens. And they give the soul to the clothings. So for me, it's always easier to focus always on the human. The fashion industry is changing so fast and it was so set. Sometimes creating pictures, you are really involving so much of your energy, of your soul, of everything, and then it lasts for 2 or 3 months. And then the next season is coming and nobody else needs these pictures again. So for me, it's more interesting to create pieces. They're more timeless.
Mm-hmm. What is fashion photography for me? Very similar. I really love to connect with the model. I like to bring a sort of energy on set, and I try to get that energy coming, organically from the model. And I love telling a story.
It's also interesting when you have a really inspiring designer on set. Let them talk about what was their inspiration about this collection, what was their thinking about the colors, about the materials, and then it gets life.
I think sometimes it also depends what you're actually shooting. Like if you're shooting e-commerce, you have to, in a way, focus on the clothes and make sure that you hit all the profiles and stuff like that. And it can become quite repetitive. And then when you're working on lookbooks, there's a combination of model and clothes, but really, it's all about the designer's collection and putting that into the brand's world. But then when you're shooting editorial, which is what we mostly shoot, or like campaigns, we're selling a lifestyle that the brand wants to sell to the public. There needs to be a connection with the model and the viewer, and I think it all comes together by really having that connection when you're photographing the model and giving the model the power to kind of move around the space, become who she or they or he wants to become.
You completely see and feel the second where they understand, oh, I'm invited here as a creator.
Yes.
I'm not the one who is only wearing the clothing so nobody is seeing it. I'm one of the creators of this series of pictures, and that's also, it's teamwork.
In any industry, when you have a team, you create your best work. I think it's like 10-20% of the photographer's work, but it's really the whole team, and your responsibility as a photographer is that you're kind of like the leader of the team, and you're making sure that everybody is single-minded into creating this one vision for the client, and making sure that everyone's aligned. And then you capture that moment in the way that you envision that really works for the brand. Mm-hmm. And sometimes models will bring, when they are working together and they feel that they're being respected as creatives, they can bring something completely different to the image that you have not even thought about. With fashion photography, you're kind of in this gray area in a way where it is an art form. You are creating a new reality, an ethereal, dreamlike feel, but you're also a commercial photographer because you are selling a lifestyle, a product. But it makes life easier when you have a team that you can trust, because the commercial aspect of what we do, there's so much pressure to get it right. I mean, it's, we've got art directors, sometimes 2. Sometimes I've had the model agency there. So you have all these people looking at your image, and everybody has a critique, and sometimes if you don't get it right, it becomes a sort of design by committee, and then everything kind of falls apart. But when you have a team that you can trust, you know that the client is going to like the image because they've booked you not just for you, but because you have that team.
You mentioned there that, you know, other people start critiquing and that
Yeah.
might fall apart. Does that mean that in some situations you lose your style as the photographer? Because obviously in fashion, the brand has their product, right? And they want to show that product, but yet they're still hiring you for your style. So does that maybe get lost somewhere along the way, or?
I think the best photographers are the ones who they're picking their clients.
Yeah.
And they also reject the clients they understand it's not working. There are these clients where you get later problems. You had this feeling in the first seconds when you was talking to them. Then you take the job because you think it's really good for your portfolio, or you need the money, or there are so many reasons to take over the job against your first feeling. Of course, you need to get booked for your style, but you are losing your style when you're working with the wrong clients.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gotten the clients that I wanted by really being super, you know, clear on my style. Because if you're booking me, that means your brand somehow is aligned with my style. Because, you know, I like to shoot with the saturated palette. I like colors on the frame. I like to shoot with, you know, like a 12 to 18 millimeter to kind of distort the image, you know, in a way. So, you know, I'm not going to be shooting for, I don't know, JC Penney's or something like that. You know, I'm going to be shooting for a client that aligns with how I want to shoot.
Yeah.
But that's really a big plus for you, I would say, because it's so amazing when you really find a style you're being comfort with and really say, this is what I'm doing and where I know I'm good with this. For me, for example, I like so many different things. I like so many different styles, and I'm completely open to define it completely new for a job. People that love my portfolio and they love the more creative things in my portfolio, but they don't trust this style for their brand. And then they want completely boring stuff. But then it's not looking like the pictures they saw before in my portfolio, and then everybody is not happy. So that was really a big process to find ways. For me, it was a situation that I changed my light system I'm working a lot with to have the chance, when I don't use flashlights and using more film lights, I have the chance to work in the same second more on creative things like double exposures, long exposures, but also have the safety shot for the client. Then later, they really, when they see both, then they are strong enough to go, wow, we take the creative one. But when you don't have the chance to do both, there is no chance.
Sometimes you do get a client that has not booked you, that yes, they like your style, but they want their normal images because it's aligned with the brand. And I think what you mentioned is really smart, that sometimes it's good to shoot what they want, but then shoot something that they had no idea you were shooting to kind of present them. Because you're totally right. Sometimes they get so inspired that they just want to go with that, and you've completely almost like changed the direction of what they envision. And that sometimes could be sweet when that happens.
There's a lot of times a lot of money involved, what you are handling on your shoulders in the end. And in the end, when the pictures are not like the client want to have them, they're not saying, okay, the model was not good, or this was not good, or that was not happening on the day. It's you as photographer, because your name is, of course it's the team, but for the client, it's about you.
When people hear that you're a fashion photographer, they think, oh wow, you're just shooting, you know, wonderful models, you know, by the sunset, or like, you know,
dream lifestyle.
Yeah, it's like, oh, what a dream lifestyle. But the reality is that it is a high pressure job. And you know, you alluded that a lot of the pressure, it is actually put on the photographer to deliver, regardless of like who's in front of the camera, what's gone wrong, because you are the sort of team leader. So if something's not working in the image, you need to make sure that does not happen again, and you try to fix that problem.
One thing that I'd really like to touch on is just how you think that fashion photography has changed from a consumption point of view. So we've gone from the traditional magazine covers and big billboards, and I now feel like with the rise of social media that a lot of fashion is now just really consumed on small screens, right? And does that change the way that you guys work in the fashion industry?
I think the rise in video, because the content is being digested on social, and you know, nowadays the algorithms favor more video. That's where it's more evolving. I've seen a lot of more budgets being pushed towards moving images, telling more of a robust brand story using the medium of film. Now it's kind of like a mixture of like influencer models. This is like a thing, like, you know, models that don't have a modeling agency and became really big on social, and now they're doing fashion editorials and they're doing campaigns. So that's a big change.
When you didn't plan to really shoot moving images, and you have a dress with such a strong material, and you get the model, you see in her eyes she likes the material and is playing with it, but you don't have a chance to really bring this on this one picture. It's a little, and mostly I don't tell that to the model that I know doing a video, and maybe only getting the moment where she try how the dress is really working to give me the best image, and this is later her process to understand the dress and the material is later this special thing, and when you give that your client on top, you are in the end of the day they really like you. So
it's like a little surprise.
You need it finally.
And another change that I've seen is you know, like a lot of shoots back in the days, they used to be in the studio with controlled lighting. And now a lot of things are being shot outside on location. Sometimes, you know, locations that are not set up for a shoot.
Do you think you have a preference for that control of a studio environment, or would you prefer to shoot with natural light?
When I first started, I used to love being in the studio. I loved being in the studio, making sure that everybody's in the right position. The makeup artist has their section, the stylist has their section, the lighting team are getting all these lights, and I just be like, right, I feel like in control, you know, and like whatever. And in 2020, there were a lot of shoots happening outside, and sometimes we couldn't put a light with a C-stand because the producer has forgotten to get a permit or something, and you've had to kind of embrace the natural light and this crazy spill that's happening. And sometimes I would tell my assistant to grab, you know, their jacket and like block the light a little bit and become like, you know, try to create like some negative, I don't know, some contrast with their jacket. This image here, you know, this image, we were walking around the Barbican, and I said to the model, hey, why don't you go into this, you know, greenhouse conservatory? And there were all these people like walking around, and I walked her there, and I saw the light hitting her, and I said, just turn your face this way because that's where the light's coming in. And in my head, I had this concept that she was you know, a butterfly ready to kind of lift off. And I said, just open up a little bit and kind of like look down. And then it just, I just had some nice natural light just hitting the water. And then all this like flowers came together, and I just composed it in a way that I felt that worked. So so I think like shooting outside, you can, even if the producers forgot to get a permit, you can find magic.
Yes,
absolutely. I think.
I always preferred shooting outside, always available light, finding and hunting the light in the best moments. Also understand sometimes that a gray sky can be incredible for some kind of pictures. And playing also with how you create your background and involve the lines and so on. But in the end, for me, was shooting in the studio a long time really horrible. And then I started via an accident with a client to shoot beauty and completely fall in love with it. And I would say I prefer to go with fashion outside on location, available light, but also direct in maybe my available light with a little bit film light on top. To really create what I want to have, or to hold the whole day, the whole session together, that I have the chance to involve also some lights to the available light. But I would say for beauty, I really prefer studio, because I really can work with so many different light resources to really bring the best out of the skin, of the textures the makeup artist is bringing in, of the hair and so on. I also really like doing fashion in the studio. But then you really need interesting fashion. You need really cool materials. You really need cool shapes. You really need a model who understand how to move and give you really something that it makes sense to have 10 pictures near to the same setting. So it really needs to be special with the light, with a lot of parts.
Ava, I'd love you to talk me through this shot here that we have here and the shoot that you went to on this and the whole thought process and creative process behind it.
Yeah, this was an editorial for Numero Netherlands, and it was a really special day because it was really something cool and special for us as team. It was a really, really small team that we get this special dress. The last look, Virgil Abloh designed for Louis Vuitton before he died last year. And normally they don't give it out in Paris, and we got the package and was all like, okay, we are going crazy, but we would definitely want to shoot this model inside this look, and he had a shooting on this day. So we had 1.5 hours to create a complete editorial. We had the plan to have water, but we only have 1.5 days to find our spot. So I was saying, okay, it's the dock beach in Berlin. I'm always walking there with my dogs, so I know the light there and the light situation. I know that when I only have this 1.5 evening hours, that I get there the spots I want to tell with this story, with having more this kind of blue hour feeling with the white dresses. We had a lot of white involved in the editorial. Yeah, and it was really funny because we had the stylist, the makeup artist, and 2 models. And I and one of my dogs. And we always need to cover up the situation that we maybe only need to retouch 1 or 2 dogs out of the pictures later. Yeah, it was fast, funny, and we all like the results.
Good, great.
This was a very interesting shoot because the model turned up 3 hours late. So and the concept was that I wanted to play with available light. So at the time, like I mentioned before, I used to shoot a lot in the studio and used to use a lot of strobes. But with this one, it was all the sort of available light that was coming from the windows. And I sort of shaped it a bit by having some black flags and stuff. So I can just have that sort of nice edge lighting on the body. And then we also had some sort of like a white polyboard, so we can bounce some light on the face. And when I started to work on the concept for this, I wanted everything to be sort of like cream and kind of white. I wanted the background to be that sort of same cream color. I wanted it to be simplistic, and I wanted the light to do a lot of the talking, and I didn't want to do a lot of post-production on this work. I wanted it to feel quite filmic. It got into I think this one's for Vogue Italy. But yeah, I mean it was one of those things where I wanted to play around with the lighting, and I wanted to make sure that it kind of draws you in the more that you look at it. I was lucky that when the model turned up eventually, I still had that lighting at the time, and that image was sort of inspired me to use available light, and if I'm not using available light, all of it, I sort of enhance it with film light, because I before, like, my images felt it just felt too sharp for me. It felt like super commercial, like really flashy, and I kind of wanted to move away from that. So that was like the beginning of like my exploration with the available light. That was that image.
Okay, so with one final question, which is, if there was a photographer that wanted to get into fashion photography, they're just starting on that fashion photography journey, what would that one piece of advice that you would want to give to that new photographer?
The biggest problem, I don't have only one piece of advice. But finally, team building, learning a lot about people who you want to partner up and team up with, understand how important it could be that you have somebody who's holding your back when there are situations coming up, and they always will come up. It's not always everything perfect on our shooting, so we need to understand that really fast. The other part is doing. Really, you only can really learn to photograph and understand light and understand your camera when you really work a lot with it. So I think this is really important. Always go and try to assist.
Yeah.
Really take over every single chance. At the moment, I see a lot of times in the younger people, they don't know about that, how important it is. We maybe studied and worked a long time as photographer, and then we assisted for 2 years for like nothing. A lot of times 7 days a week. Because we really want to do it. And I think it's your biggest chance when you find something you really want to do, then don't lose the spirit.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it's important to build a team. Build a team that you're going to work with on editorials, on tests. When I first started, I assisted at a studio in London, and I assisted for 3 years. Every day I hardly made any money, and I learned a lot from watching other photographers, working with gaffers, working with lighting assistants. I think it's also important to learn what kind of modeling agencies you want to start testing for, and kind of reaching out to them. I think, because sometimes clients come up to you as a photographer and ask what models you think I should work with. Do you have any contacts with modeling agencies? I also think it's good to just take your camera and just shoot every day, and just go outside and shoot, because sometimes you might just be shooting something and you realize it's actually a really good location for your fashion shoot. I think it's good to just go on Instagram and start saving images that inspire you, and look back on it and say, okay, ask questions. What do I actually like about this image? Why is this image inspired me? Because I think that will then start helping you kind of understand what your potential style could be.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to understand the fashion industry, understand what certain designers are doing, why are they doing it this way, why are certain designers deciding to use this particular photographer. Learn as much as you can, and just keep going, and hopefully you build a team, and you are able to produce the type of work that you want to produce.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much. I think we've had an incredible discussion there. We've really gone through some amazing advice and some really great examples that we've looked at as well. So thank you both so much. Thank you for those of you that are watching at home. If you've enjoyed this episode of Nikon Sessions, please make sure you subscribe to the Nikon Europe YouTube channel so that you don't miss any more Nikon Sessions episodes. Thank you so much.